sometimes as adults we spend our life in conversation. Well, wait a minute, is it conversation? We spend our life talking, and particularly if we're engaged in the corporate world or out doing jobs, we tend to have a lot of things to say and we have to listen to a lot of things. But conversation is a little different. And you know, at the heart of things, conversation is what creates consciousness. Now we all know www, so I want to give you the idea of sitting with CCC. CCC, conversation creates consciousness. I think it's probably really, really the essential element in what makes inspired parenting, what makes you into a parent who somehow generates magic and develops the baby to the child to the teenager as somebody who's experienced magic all through their development, all through their growing up. And that key in the inspired parenting is that conversation isn't just talking, and it isn't endless factual information. Conversation, in many ways, is a shared journey. So today, if you have a few minutes, and thank you for clicking in because that's really quite beautiful, it allows me to share with you some of the things that I would normally be doing one-to-one with people, perhaps in a consultation now. Privately, and we can do it collectively, which is far more engaging. So in a moment, let's come back to conversation, and just prior to that, let me say that as I'm sitting here at Gita Yoga's headquarters, if you like, Gita Yoga, Gita International is the name we have, and we have people all over the world. So some of the stories I want to share with you will come from all over this globe that we live on. The reason we have the star here is to remind us that we and our children are striving to be like a five-pointed star. We want our five senses, and indeed we want our body, the legs and the arms and the head, to all be sparkling. So we have our five senses activated, have our body activated. But there's another thing. In the ancient Egyptian tradition, the kutis were the stars in the sky that shone back their wisdom through light, so that the people on the planet who are still in the body would have access to the wisdom. Now, I think every child deserves to have an adult around them, or several adults around them, who are like kutis, who beam their wisdom and beam their light. Not because we're perfect, but because we care. Now, coming back from there to conversation, what I'd like you to consider is that conversation is a shared experience. It's between two beings, at least, sometimes three, as in the two parents and the child. And it's not limited to a verbal response. So let's go back. If you're at the stage of holding a tiny baby, there's a conversation going on. Talk to the baby. Talk to it as if you know the baby is responding, because inside that baby's body, as you well know, inside that baby's body there is a soul, and that soul might be a sage, it might be one of the wisest returning souls that has ever come back to earth. Presently though, it is a baby, and it's relying on you to train it and explain to it how this present world works. So whilst you're holding the baby, whilst you're caring for it, don't think, well, it can't talk, so I'll just fix things. Converse with it and allow time between your several sentences so that there is a response, there's an opportunity for your baby to respond. So we might say something like, do you think it's time for you to come down and to prepare yourself for sleep? I thought so too. And in that pause, there's an opportunity for the baby's brain to hear the sentence, to make its own response at its own level, and then for you to continue. So you might say, I thought so too, so let's tuck you down now. And if you're the dad who's doing that, you might then say, and in a moment your mum's probably going to come in and check that I've done it the right way. You can laugh together, but allow time in between those sentences, those thoughts, so that the baby can respond. As the child grows and reaches the stage where they're beginning to talk, allow time for them to think. Sometimes we rush in, we ask them a question, and we give them a 1 second turnaround before we respond. Does again come back to the idea of WWWs. Watch, wait and wonder. So sometimes when you've asked a question or you've said something, just wait for your 2 or 3 or 4-year-old to think and then respond. Be ready for them to say something ridiculous and later to come back and say something more meaningful. If you're providing a magical background for a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old child, then recognise that what's really special is that their imagination is limitless, and they will want to say things differently. They'll say things as if they're coming from around the corner or over the top, as if they've slipped in on a rainbow, and you'll think, where did that come from? Don't reduce it back to logic. Take the opportunity to listen, to share, to engage in a conversation, and use some of the, shall I call them techniques or things that you know, very simply reminding you that for some things that we want to do, there is just one answer. So it might be, do you want to take your shoes off? The answer is yes or no. Are you ready to eat your meal? Yes or no. That's fine. That's what we call convergent thinking, and there's a place for that. Otherwise the world would probably fall over, because we'd all be off musing and none of us would ever really get back to getting productive action. But having said that, in our conversation, in order to develop consciousness, what we also want to do is allow for predictive thinking, for imaginative thinking, because these are sort of different. We want to even allow the child to have an opinion. We would like sometimes for there to be an interpretation of a set of events, and sometimes we'd like a synthesis, as if you would like to draw everything together. So what I'd like you to do is begin smiling. Stop yourself every time you go for a right or wrong answer, and start to engage in the divergent, imaginative responses. You can engage some of those by maybe saying to the child, so what would happen if you take your shoes off now? Well, my feet might get cold. It's wonderful. That's so much more fun than do it now, quickly, quickly. Far too much of that in our world. So that imaginative fantasy, so what do you think might happen tonight when you're asleep? What do you think happens outside in the street? And they might just say, well, the cars will go by. Tremendous. So they're bringing some knowledge, or they're having an opinion. Just be sure that as you work with your child from basically in utero right through till, I guess, the time we all exit the life, really, our conversation needs to be the pathway that takes us forward. So conversation creates consciousness. Engage in a thinking style that allows your child, your baby, to develop all of the beautiful imaginative faculties that they have. So I'll leave you with that for this week. There's probably quite a few ways you can take the CCC, conversation creating consciousness. See you soon.